Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest, returning guest. We're going to kind of co-host. He has a slide presentation, so we're going to kind of riff off that. And he's done a great job. There's links to justice.gov Epstein file, so we're going to go through that. He's titled his presentation Epstein the Eugenicist. So it's one aspect of this incredible drop of 3.5 million files. People are seeing different elements to it. I've done a little bit of research myself. Can't say I've done as much as him. It's Dave Smith. This will be our fourth show. He's from the Bad Press and also operates Hemispheric Press. So I'll put a link to his Substack. His Substack is the main go-to. But we've done two shows on the Dulles brothers and then one on Puharich. A lot of people don't know much about Andrea Puharich. He's really kind of one of the early New Agers. Seems to have dropped off of the radar, but he should be back on the radar. A lot of stuff I actually heard on a much bigger podcast, Peter Levenda talking about the seance we talked about. So I feel like we beat him to the punch. Levenda loves me. He's a friend of the show. He really just keeps calling me an anti-Semite because of my Crowley stuff. I have to repost all the stuff where he really doesn't like me. It's just it that way. But anyway, we're going to talk about this eugenicist. I am not familiar with the 1953 trust, so I'm learning something new. So Dave Smith, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate coming back on, and I've been listening to all of your shows kind of on the Epstein files, so I'm very familiar. You've been doing some great work, just kind of, exposing the breadth of the Epstein network, as you've been calling it. So yeah, excited to kind of come on and share, but also, it's been a rough ride so far.
Yeah, there's a lot of different aspects, and some of the weirdest things are the things around that were kind of secret. Like he had this science group that he was really involved with, some of these kind of like these atheistic scientists and stuff like that. But you didn't see the kind of dark underbelly of all that stuff, and the files is what exposed it. Like a lot of them were on Joe Rogan. Like Joe Rogan's a nexus point of a lot of these guys, so it gets creepy. But tell me about the 1953 trust. I don't know anything about it actually.
Well, so we were my co-host Trevor, asked me like, a couple days after the file dump dropped if I wanted to do an Epstein episode, and I was like, sure, but I hadn't really seen anything about it kind of like in the day or two since then. And the first thing that I looked up was the Epstein news or something like that, just a very generic search. And one of the headlines that popped up was the 1953 trust. And it was talking about how his girlfriend, Karina Shulyak, was set to receive just this exorbitant amount of money. It was $100 million, this insane diamond that he had, and, all of his properties and stuff. And so it was like kind of mainstream media focused on her, but I was like, that's interesting. I'll take a look at that document and I'll just start with that. Got to start somewhere. And I noticed some interesting names that were slated to receive money in the trust that I found interesting. And one of them was Martin Nowak, who is part of that kind of academic scientific circle, that you were mentioning. And so I was like, that's strange that he's named in the will. And there's been reporting on that. But then there's, also the lawyers who were involved with kind of making that, like there were, it's Darren Indike and Richard Kahn are the two guys who are responsible for, kind of writing the will and like being the executors of the trust. And so Indike has been his longtime personal lawyer, kind of his day-to-day, like, on retainer lawyer, and then has helped him organize for his criminal defense and stuff like that. So very involved. And then Richard Kahn is all over the documents. He's Epstein's accountant. And so immediately those two guys, they're at the very top of the list. It's the guarantor is Jeffrey Epstein, and then it's Darren Indike and Richard Kahn. What's suspicious about the 1953 trust that immediately kind of like raised a red flag was that it was edited 2 days before his death. And so it was edited on August 8th. and I was, so if you, kind of like that gets, a little bit into the presentation and stuff. But if you scroll down enough, you'll see like blue writing in the it's like a handwritten amendment to the trust. And so I'm assuming, that blue writing right there. And what that's talking about is it's talking about Karina Shulyak and a proposal for marriage. And so it looks to me like Epstein or Indike and Khan, all three maybe, were trying to get it, like make it look like he was married to Karina Shulyak, even though they weren't married. And so he like proposed to her with this insane ring. And, she
32
accepted
carats, guys. Like
32.78. There's a joke we have that it's almost 33, which
right, there you go. It rounds up to 33.
Yeah, that's my argument, at least. My co-host hates it, but I'm assuming that's what was edited on August 8th. And I know you, I learned a ton from you, and you actually, kind of like solidified, a little bit of my opinion about what happened to Epstein while he was in the MCC. And I thought that you would find that interesting of the editing date. You talked about all this paperwork that he makes a change to his trust that includes seemingly a marriage proposal to this random Belarusian woman that I've never heard of. I had never heard of her until I opened the 1953 trust and saw that article. And she's a 40-year-old Belarusian, and apparently she's on X posting like kind of insane things. Like Tim Dillon mentioned her in his show.
He sure about did. It's been discounted, I guess. Like
that's what I figured. I was like, there's no way that's real, is what it felt like. But I was like, maybe.
I believed it. It sounded very legit when it came out. It sounded like somebody from the inside, but it turned out to be discounted.
And there's a ton of that, and that's what I'm suspicious of this document. Just kind of I guess, kind of like what it's not your traditional trust. And so what it begins to look like me is like it's part of some sort of cover up. And the other interesting thing is that, so he supposedly amended the will 2 days before his death, but the lawyers didn't sign it until days after his death. And I don't know if that's regular procedure for stuff like trusts, but I would think that the lawyers would be, at least one of the executors would be present when they signed. So it was like, I think it's another witness that signed the trust that was there, if I'm not mistaken. But
this is like done by Indike on August 18th after his death.
Yeah, like, it was like 8 days.
Yeah. This is okay. Let's go to a freaking with the person who stamps it, the notary public. So wow, that's really suspicious.
Yeah, and so I looked at that, and then I was like, I don't know who Karina Shulyak is. I've never heard of her. And it seems like it's just this person to try and kind of protect. And what it looks like to me is that it was a legal move on behalf, like seems like a legal maneuver by Indike and Khan to gain a hold of the trust and to oversee the affairs, because they knew that they were going to be caught up in lawsuit, possible criminal investigations. Like, the Epstein estate has been the target of both civil and legal, litigation. They've been in and out, and I haven't had time to look into like the minutia of all the cases that they've been, but that's what it looks like to me. And especially we'll try and talk about Zora Ranch, definitely at some point. But that kind of gets back, like the Epstein estate sold Zora Ranch. And so they were able to transfer it into, and I guess get it, out of the way. And that's really interesting given, some of the facts that we'll learn about Zora Ranch. And, there's like his neighbors. Yeah, we can get into that later. We should probably stick with the 1953 trust, but there's some pretty nuts stuff about what was going on at Zora Ranch, as I'm sure most of your listeners are aware.
It's crazy. It only gets crazier. It's just unreal. There's just so many elements that are really wild. This is really sus though. The fact that this is done like 2 days before his death and handwritten. Like the guy had immense resources. He was worth $500 million or just something really crazy. So like you can get these lawyers to just work, and all these, look at all this money supposedly he gave out.
So yeah, and that's so an important fact about this is that the money was never dispersed to these recipients that you're seeing on the screen. So the estate was valued at $650 million. But since it's been tied up in so many lawsuits, and since it's paid out so many, it's had to pay out to victims, and it's had to pay legal fees and kind of all this stuff, like it's more like $100 million or something around that range of like what the official value of the estate is. So these people never saw the money, but I think that they're like including them in the trust in order to kind of maybe arrange like a hush money kind of deal,
a slush fund or something.
It's kind of what it looks like to me, of like putting people kind of on the list of like, these are maybe these are people that we need to kind of like that we need to pay, and who will accept will accept the payment and stay silent. Because a lot of the people that you see on that list are like his house managers. So every single house manager for Paris, Manhattan, Palm Beach, like all of these people are slated to receive anywhere between like $3 and $5 million. His pilots were, Vysotsky, I think is one of his names. He is slated to, I think, receive $10 million or something. And he testified at Ghislaine Maxwell's trial that he never saw anything untoward happen, while he was on the flights. And so it seems like it's kind of like those people, like it's not like, it's kind of another thing of like one of these black books, like where it's like, you got to take the names. It's like, it's not immediately obvious why all of them are on the list, but there's connections that obviously, if you start to search all of these people in the files, then you just get entry after entry. Anne Rodriguez. Yeah, sorry.
She's in there all the time. And all the emails, like Rodriguez, Fontanilla, these are all common people just popping up on random stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I went through. Actually, I have a document. It's not in the presentation, but it goes through and it just gives like a really short description. But like a lot of those people, I'm like, yeah, if I were looking to like, make sure that someone stayed silent, like my house manager, then yeah, I would give them, a few $1 million, but I'm not 100%. That's just kind of like my take on it. But, on that list on the bottom, that's Martin Nowak. Sorry, I was moved away.
Oh, sorry. Let me go back there. I'm just kind of scrolling.
I can't remember. It's like on the
is it this one?
I think so. It's on that one, but Martin Nowak is on there. And he was slated to receive $5 million. I think it's like something like
bequests. Shuliak's at the top, 50 million. Kahn and Dyke you mentioned,
and they got 75 million combined, but they also ran the trust, so they technically had control.
Martin Nowak, there he is, right here.
Yeah, and they misspelled his name, which is kind of funny. But when I saw that name, it was like one of those that had rung a bell from like what I had been looking into previously, because I had been trying to look into Epstein's scientific, connections. And Martin Nowak was like, the thing about his scientific connections is that the list is so long, and like, it's been a while since I did the research. So it's like, oh, Martin Nowak, I know is on that list, but I have no idea who he is. And so I, searched him, and it was like, there was a bunch of stuff, bunch of reporting, because, on his relationship to Epstein. And so that's kind of like the next step that I took. The rest of the trust, it just kind of was like a bunch of legal stuff. Shuliak was, I kind of think I mentioned this, but she was slated to receive all of the property. She never did. The trust maintained him. So yeah.
So there's all your kind of disbursements and stuff.
Yeah. But then, so when you like look into Martin Nowak, he led, so he actually started with Epstein's funding, Harvard's program for evolutionary dynamics, which is PED for short, the acronym, which is a disturbing,
crazy,
yet fitting acronym, possibly intentional. But that hyperlink right there goes to his publications and gives you kind of an idea. And I will post this, just a note for people, I will post this presentation on, if I can find a way to do it on the Substack. I've never posted a PowerPoint, but I'll figure out a way to do it.
You can turn it to a PDF, I think.
Yeah, I might also go through Prezi. I've done that for school before, but I don't know if that would work for. Anyways, I will find a way to get that presentation out so people can kind of like click through links too. But yeah, so he was originally so he was born in Austria. He is a mathematician and a biologist, and so he uses mathematics to model evolution. Is I think what his specialty is, and I don't know a lot about um, science or anything, so I will be very bad with descriptions of kind of like their niche genres of some of these people, but he uses mathematics and he was instrumental in coming up with this theory of cooperation. So instead of competition as being an evolutionary driver, cooperation is the primary driver, and he's writing those books really when he is when he's the chair of the program for evolutionary dynamics. And so he has some like those first couple books are like a little esoteric and kind of philosophical, which is, I don't know, I found it a little bit strange, but anyways, so this is a very prestigious position at Harvard, just to kind of like, create this program. And it was created with a $6.5 million grant from Epstein. And Harvard did an investigation into Nowak's relationship with Epstein after the initial story broke, and they claimed that Epstein had donated 9.1 million. So that would be like over 2/3 of the funding would be going to this one program and this one guy, essentially. But I found an article from 2003, and it's somewhere in that presentation, that like Harvard's own newspaper, the Harvard Crimson, said that he had given over 30 million. And that was in 2003, like I said. So
Love to
who
wear
knows?
Harvard shirts too. Epstein
Yeah.
did. I can remember
Well,
that.
and that's what there's another slide that's about his other Harvard connections, and it goes really deep. Obviously, I think that's Alan Dershowitz that he's pictured with. He was technically a visiting fellow at Harvard at one point, because the psychology, Dr. Stephen Kosslyn, who was a psychologist, pulled some strings to get Jeffrey Epstein as like visiting fellow status, and he obviously never showed up for. He showed up for registration, which is interesting, but then he never showed up for class. Yeah, so that's like, there's also this thing happening that's called like Axios, I think coined this term, but it's called the Leon Black route. And so this was 2003 is when the program for evolutionary dynamics was started. He was able to fund freely. He was able to kind of like donate at will. But then once he was convicted and served the sentence in 2008, he was blacklisted, quote unquote, from donating directly to Harvard, and I believe to MIT, but MIT was also. But anyways, what it appears that Epstein was doing was just funneling money through Leon Black and through Apollo Investments. And Leon Black, I think, has an MBA from Harvard, and so his donations look, and I mean, I don't think has the same record.
Just blinked out there.
Kind of Leon Black's investment group is named in kind of this conduit for money. And so even after he's technically banned, he continues to fund the program for evolutionary dynamics and things like MIT Media Lab, which is right down the road from Harvard. It's in
that's
Cambridge.
Joy Ito, right? He got in trouble too.
And that's what, there's a little bit on him, but so he's establishing kind of like this, it's a home base for him. And in Harvard, if you go back to that presentation, there is, I think, so that's talking about the Leon Black donations, totaling 6 million. I've seen like bigger numbers, and that was from mainstream reporting. So I like to look at a lot of like mainstream sources just to see what you can find like in the public record and like what they'll kind of admit to through there. But
the timing of this is really extraordinary, because today I just saw this thing from Epstein to Nowak. Like, it's incredible. But this is I don't know if this is in your presentation. but this is from a 2012.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is bizarre.
Yeah. Do you want to read that? Or
Yeah,
talk
so
about,
this is to Jeffrey Epstein from Martin Nowak on looks like November 12th, 2012. Jeffrey, I am back from Rome. I am in Vienna now. We'll be back in Boston on Wednesday. I met Svante Pabo from Leipzig. He sequences old bones. Got a complete Neanderthal genome. You would like him. He knows church. The two of them could build a Neanderthal. The little bit gets cut off by the comments, but
all right, Neanderthal person is what it says. So.
a Neanderthal person.
And then it's M, so he knows him like enough to just sign M, you know.
He shows up in like, I think it's over 8,000 files. So when you search NOAC, it's 8,000, and you know a lot of them are this kind of like some of this like spam email. But there's tons of stuff, and I think if you click to the next slide, this is we'll go into this, and then I've got more stuff on kind of his the actual files that he's in this recent dump. But this is from the Harvard investigation of 2019. This just shows you how close that Epstein was to NOAC and the PED. But the third area of focus from our investigation was Epstein's relationship with the Program for Evolutionary Dynamics. As noted above, Epstein initially funded the program in 2003 with a gift of $6.5 million. Epstein maintained a relationship with the director of the PED, Professor Martin Nowak, over the next 15 years, including after Epstein's release from prison. While we have not been able to determine the precise number of campus visits, we understand that Epstein visited the offices of PED in Harvard Square more than 40 times between 2010 and 2018. We did not find evidence that Epstein engaged with undergraduate students during these visits or during his time as a visiting fellow. Instead, Epstein used these visits principally as opportunities to speak with prominent faculty from the Cambridge area, many of them Harvard faculty. While inviting Epstein to campus did not violate any Harvard policies, aspects of his relationship to the PED, such as his access to the program's offices, treatment on the PED's website, and interactions concerning one grant application, do implicate Harvard policies, and our findings and recommendations address these issues. So he visited, this is after 2008 and his arrest, after he's been convicted of child, solicitation of a child prostitute, whatever that's supposed to mean.
Right, a felony.
Yeah. So, and Harvard is aware of this because there's communications with their president, their current president, not Lawrence Summers, who we'll talk about a little bit, but the president at the time when he tried to donate in 2009 or 2010, the president was aware of his, and the lawyers were aware of, his conviction. So it's not like they were completely ignorant. They knew who he was, and they basically arranged a way for him to get money, kind of through Leon Black and stuff. But yeah, the next one I think is the the Bates numbers or whatever they're called.
Okay. Next one, 7.
Yeah. So yeah, I think I covered one of them up, but
I can probably find it just by putting the hospitality word in there. Let's see if I can find the document.
Yeah. But that first one was EFTA 019331998, and
let me get back to the. I'm bouncing around all over the place. Okay.
Let me see what that one is.
EFT. Say those numbers again.
So EFTA 019331998.
Got it. Our spy was captured. Did you torture her? Right?
Yeah, and so that's what Nowak says. Our spy was captured. And the full one, let me see here. It was.
Did you right? So this is all over the internet. This stuff about torture, right?
Yeah, this is one that was like, and this is in, like I said, Martin Nowak, has been in the public eye. He was in trouble. He was in hot water the first time around. He seems to be in a lot more trouble now. The funny thing, it's actually the opposite of funny, but so for that statement that I just read from Harvard, he was sanctioned, and then the sanctions in 2021 is when he was sanctioned, and then the sanctions were lifted in 2023. And the sanctions were, extremely light. It was like they took him off of a couple classes or something. And he's still employed by Harvard. And so just keep that
still there. We just checked, so he's still employed at this point.
Yeah, keep that in mind. kind of as we kind of go through some of these.
I'll go
I
to
have
the
that
next
one.
VFTA. Let's do that. The one that is this is the program for evolutionary dynamics, right? You want me to bring that up? There it is. That's
Yes.
the next slide, yeah.
Yeah, they have and that was one where yeah, there's a bunch of interesting names. There's someone I put that on there too because there's I think in that one is maybe Karina Tarnita is mentioned, but yeah, I was looking at there was one. This one has also been flying around. I think that Tim Dillon read this one, and I don't know if I don't think I put the Bates number in it, but it's from Martin Nowak to Ghislaine Maxwell,
This one,
and
right?
it says,
Sorry.
yeah, no, you're good. Sorry, I have it over here. Dear Ghislaine, many thanks again for your amazing hospitality. I'm so very sorry I caused you so much worry and that I spoiled this day. I am so happy that I did not kill anybody. My perspective of life has changed somehow. Lots of love, Martin. And that was sent on August 25th, 2002. So this was even before, the program for evolutionary dynamics was started. He was involved at Princeton too at that point. So that's, you kind of see glimpses into the abyss.
He's been associated with them for a long time, right? So at least a decade or long time. This other one, the tortures from 2014. So they're friends for over 10 years at least.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. They said all the way up until 2018 that Epstein was making campus visits. I mean, he visited the offices at PED like over 40 times. And, I assume that he was meeting, kind of with MIT and had kind of the same setup over there. But that's extensive connection into Harvard, and that's into the wider academic community. I mean, especially when you start to look at some of these other names that I'll mention, in a bit, it's staggering. Like that was one of the things that just like caught me off guard the first time I started looking into it, is like the extent of his kind of influence with some of these institutions and some of these scientists. Like some of these Martin Nowak isn't necessarily a household name, but Lawrence Krauss, that's one where a lot more people will know. And he's Murray Gell-Mann.
Yeah. Pardon me?
Murray Gell-Mann is a Nobel Prize winning physicist who coined the term quark in the concept, or I think kind of the concept. And he co-founded the Santa Fe Institute, and Zorro Ranch is right by the Santa Fe Institute. So we'll get into that in a little bit, but that's a Nobel Prize winner. And that's decades of connection with him too. And we'll get into why he was so interested in Santa Fe. But yeah, so that's kind of...
Yeah. These guys are involved in Epstein's foundation when the foundation was running. I don't really know how long the foundation was running, but I pulled this off of one of Epstein's old sites, and he was organizing a doomsday conference in 2012, and it included Minsky, who was basically referenced in 2001: A Space Odyssey, and then you see Martin Nowak here, Nowak, and then Krauss, and then Gregory Benford, who I don't know who that is, but they're all in this doomsday conference. It's really something else.
It's very bizarre, and that's what I mean. Is Nowak is right there. I mean, he's at the center of kind of this stuff, and this is the Boston, this is the Cambridge Center. There's a Manhattan Center. There's a Silicon Valley Center. So it's like, not only is he this connected in one place, he's that connected everywhere. And when you talked about the Edge Foundation, and you've talked about John Brockman, and you've talked about how all of the big tech gets caught up with Epstein through that network. And that was both New York. I think it was, I'm not sure where in New York, but it was New York, and then it was Silicon Valley, and Bezos was there. Sergey Brin was there. The CEO of Microsoft, whoever Bill Gates' right-hand man, was there. Elon Musk.
Nathan Myhrvold was his name.
Yeah.
Musk too. A lot of them.
23andMe, which is the genetics. Whoever, I don't know all these people's names.
Nowitzki.
Yeah.
Her sister was the head of YouTube. She passed away, but this other sister was involved in 23andMe and married to Sergey Brin. That's one point, if I remember.
Yeah, so that's what I don't have a lot of that kind of thing. That's a whole other show. But it's just the point of like, we kind of try and hone in on a couple of these people, but to scale back out and like understand the context of it too, it's important.
Agreed. I mean, it's really something else. These NOAC stuff, PDFs and all that. Yeah, the spy was captured. What do you think they're talking about?
And yeah, I mean, impossible to say. So, and this I don't know. I mean, maybe it'll shed light on it. But the next person that we're going to talk about is someone who's also associated with the PED, and her name is. So yeah, there's more, kind of a little bit more on the Martin Nowak emails. It talks about the Templeton Foundation and how that was kind of another conduit for Epstein's funding, and he had connections to this guy named Barnaby Marsh. So just a few more names that kind of pop up in that. Yeah, so this is the next one, and she also shows up, extensively, throughout the files. And so her name is Karina Tarnita, and she was one of Nowak's proteges at Harvard. And so she was in the graduate program and the PhD program, in program for evolutionary dynamics, and Martin Nowak was her advisor. And so she shows up on all sorts of papers with Martin Nowak. She shows up in all sorts of kind of research. She is Romanian by birth, and she is currently a professor of ecology and evolutionary biology at Princeton. And like I said, Nowak was her advisor. And so that first document, the Bates number is right there, but I have it on the screen.
There it is right there.
Yeah. She emails Jeffrey Epstein, and she says, this is on April 9th, 2009. So this is very soon after he was being released from prison. This is like, kind of in the, some of the similar windows. So there's contact like right after that's happening. And obviously Nowak knew Epstein, through that experience, and is continuing to associate with him. So he's like trying to get him reconnected and stuff. But Karina Tarnita says, "Hi, Jeffrey. Who do you want me to give the wire transfer info to?" And he replies to her, "Rich in my office," which is Richard Kahn, who I mentioned in the 1953 trust, is Epstein's personal accountant. And so she goes on to send the information. There's a larger, it's like what you were saying about duplicates and how things have been kind of stripped. When you put that email into context, she then sends the wire transfer. Yeah, it's actually that next EFTA number.
EFTA, right? So it's 02412712719.
Yeah, sorry, this picture's got a little messed up, so I'll have to fix that.
There it is right there. Move that. Gotcha.
So in those, in that specific one, it shows a wire transfer for 10,000 and a wire transfer for 5,000, linked to Romania. So she was in Romania, and the correspondence, kind of between them is, I think it also comes up maybe in an email to Nowak of someone's asking him like where they get the girls from in Romania, and it's connected to kind of this program for evolutionary dynamics. But she sends this bank info, and it's been it was reported in Romanian news, and they kind of tied it to Jeffrey Epstein, so they were the first ones to kind of like pick up on kind of her connection. But a lot of people online, kind of in this, it's in a Nature article that's talking about, Karina Tarnita. It, mentions that a lot of people online have speculated how similar this looks to, some of the other transactions for, kind of this human trafficking operation that they had going. And the way that she has excused away the wire transfers is she has said that Epstein was inspired by her career trajectory and wanted to fund young Romanian female mathematicians. So I think that we can all get on board with that narrative. I think from what we've seen, I think he's kind of a philanthropist in this situation. But that's what Karina said, and she works for Princeton, and she's also still employed.
Still employed. Here's the information for the girl from Romania who received 10,000. So it's somebody else other than this girl, whatever her name is,
Yeah.
Karina Tornita. So
Yeah,
it's something
it's
else, right? Probably.
yeah, no,
So
that's what
Khan
it
is
is.
seeing all these transactions too, right? Like, come on, dude. Like, they're this, like the FBI, DOJ is such a joke. I
Yeah.
mean, come on. These are just like, these, at least ask them questions. Good Lord.
And so those are, and like, it's 5,000 and 10,000. Like when you see some of the other numbers in these files, it's like, that's not an astronomical number, but it's still, like you said, I mean, it's 5,000 and 10,000 here and there goes a long way. And, Romania, when you're, doing whatever
That's
it
their
is.
national salary. That's their national yearly salary, probably. I don't
Yeah.
know. I could probably look it up, like Romania.
And this is one of the, I mean, I haven't done a ton of looking into, the Romanian connections into the trafficking network, but this is exactly the territory that they were, Eastern Europe seems to be, a central target of the network for, acquisition of
The average
slaves.
annual salary is about $20,000.
Yeah. So, and that's what, I mean, it's just, there's kind of like I said, and she shows up in other places as well. But just wanted to also mention that it's not just NOAC, in the program for evolutionary dynamics. It's like, he has kind of cultivated this network within that evolutionary biology PhD program at Harvard. So he's going after what it looks like to me is people who understand genetics on a
The
very
genome, he's talking about the
scale.
Neanderthals and all that stuff, right? He's
And
writing
that
all
is, I have a buddy, and he's done a lot of research. He's done a couple interviews, but he looks into like, kind of this thing happening with the Neanderthals, and it's very, very strange, like mixed into narratives with, potentially, religions and the occult and stuff. So I found that one was a very bizarre inclusion into it. Because
his buddy, Epstein's buddy Trivers, was talking about new phenotypes. So
yeah.
Epstein, the thing is that it's a network. We just saw Epstein's emails. What are these really smart guys smarter than Epstein talking about? Without Epstein, like that's even scarier. So you're seeing this insight. I mean, people make this assumption that this is all centralized. It's only centralized because we have Epstein's emails. Think about these guys talking to each other without Epstein slowing them down or something, right?
Yeah.
Because Epstein doesn't have the same academic background.
No, he's a networker and he's an influencer, but this like maybe he's like, kind of like has a hobby interest in science or whatever the mainstream media's depiction of like, kind of his perspective on it. But, and I mentioned this in kind of like when we get to New Mexico, but it's important. It's a good point to raise here is that, so when we go back to Robert Maxwell for a second, he controlled scientific publishing in the West, across Great Britain and across the United States. And so
Pergamon Press, right?
Pergamon Press.
The
and
place
he
where
had
Satan sits in the Bible. Do you know that?
Yes.
Okay.
I had heard that before. I forgot exactly what it was, but yeah, I'd heard that before. And he was basically gifted that press. So it was the company that had immediately preceded it was a merger between Butterworth and then Springer. And Springer, I believe, was the German like academic publishing house that was obviously sold at, kind of a bargain given, Nazi Germany's loss. But I think this guy named Butterworth had a publishing house in Britain that was really struggling, and he acquired Springer. And then this guy Butterworth and, kind of a couple other people who were very well connected, very wealthy British elite, members of secret societies, members of gentlemen's clubs, members of the government, they're members of families that have generational wealth that is unbelievable. It was like they sold it to him for, like a tenth of what it costs. And so they basically just gifted this publication to Robert Maxwell, and he revolutionized scientific publishing for the worse. But I mean, it was definitely like what about peer review. Maxwell essentially invented peer review. And so he also invented the funding model for science in the West. And he basically invented, like, not maybe invented, but he really, really severely influenced how science is researched and how it's funded, and who is allowed to, research what, and kind of things like that, and what's allowed to be published. Because Pergamon Press, the other thing is that he, sorry, I'm getting a little into the weeds, but I found this really interesting. He was given, when he was gifted that press, or when they sold it to him, he was given a monopoly on Soviet technical papers, and he was able to read. So he was able to speak Russian. He was able to read Russian. And so he, and this was crucial for Western intelligence in the early Cold War, is to read the scientific papers coming out of the Soviet Union and to analyze them for, what intelligence they could provide. And so Maxwell was an essential component of that, intelligence gathering. And he also had a back channel to the KGB and all sorts of crazy stuff. But I bring that up.
Do you know that there's a guy that there's a documentary about Maxwell, or one of the head figures of MI6 says, yeah, we know about Pergamon Press. We gave him the money to buy it. Like, it's an intel op.
That's literally true.
Yeah.
That's what, and again, I think I mentioned him every show, but Steven Snyder is just someone who I've been reading for a long time. But that book is where he is the one where I'm getting that information from. I
got to get Snyder back on my show. I've talked to him 3 or 4 times. Guy's a great researcher.
We'll if we can get to it. I have an article from his that's about the New Mexico connection, and that's where some of the crazier things I've learned about. And it seems I respect him a lot, so I trust a lot of his research. But trust but verify, I guess.
I've read like 3 of his books, so I'm very familiar with his stuff. I have digital copies. So anyway,
but that's what I just wanted to mention, that stuff about Maxwell, because it's in it. It'll show up later too. But he had a stranglehold on this community, and then Epstein just picks it right back up where so this is a community that really, there are maybe like some new people, but this is Robert Maxwell's network that he's cultivated,
so he's
throughout the academic institutions.
He picked up the baton and was doing the same thing as Maxwell.
Yes. Yes. And I think he had he was not nearly as, Maxwell made it a long, long time before he ever got burned for what he was doing. And when he got burned, he got burned, but he pulled off some of the craziest stunts I've ever heard of in terms of international spy networking. I have some of it, the Promise scandal and selling the install software to the Department of Energy to siphon out nuclear secrets. He started the tech company that sold them the software, and he was in the room when they sold it. And that story is
like a little software backdoor. Yeah. A little software backdoor.
Yeah. And that's it's kind of its own thing. And like I said, it's getting a little bit ahead, but it's
all part of the spy network that these guys are spying. They're getting the information is money. So they're trying to get, this information out about anything. Really,
and that's
science,
what,
everything.
Yeah, I've been trying to make the point on kind of bad press, but it's a transnational circle, and it's crosses religions. It crosses really any boundaries that society has. There's, alliances and stuff like that, but it crosses through Great Britain. It crosses through Israel. It crosses through the CIA in the United States. It crosses through with other networks, throughout Europe. It connects with networks, in Southeast Asia. It connects with it's one of these things where, I think a lot of focus gets paid on, and for good reason. I think a lot of attention should be paid to different kind of national and different religious interests that are involved. But with this, Maxwell is a perfect, is kind of a perfect example of how a lot of these labels that we give are very, very fluid. And he operated in a very, it's almost like they're just trying to evade sovereignty of any sort. They're trying to work around international boundaries. They're trying to work around national boundaries. They're trying to do, and it's in support of, whatever their mission is. And they're usually allied on that.
Right. So Maxwell was much like Epstein. So they're moving around jurisdictions all the time.
Yeah,
And
and Epstein, that point of like him picking up the network is that's definitely what it appears, and he was doing something, but it was like he's just not as good of a spy
he
or
wasn't.
whatever he
Maxwell
was.
was way too smart. He was much smarter than
Ghislaine may have been.
yeah.
No, that's it appears that in the Maxwell family, a lot of people don't look at the rest of the Maxwell family, but Isabel, I think Isabel or Isabella is her name. She was very involved in like this tech conversation and like the tech community in the 90s and the early 2000s, and was making all sorts of money doing that, connected to Bill Gates and stuff. I think Whitney Webb, I think she has some stuff on that. But
There's
then
one connected to Santa Fe Institute, right?
yeah. And there's two brothers who it's like no one really even knows what's going on. They're just over in Eastern Europe, and they're like in incredibly powerful positions over there, and they really don't like come over to the United
They
States of the
got
West very
busted
much.
for insider trading or some kind of financial thing, and they are barred from like stockbrokering. So like
Got it.
they had to go start new careers somewhere else. Is my understanding.
Got it. Yeah, I
Financial
had not.
skullduggery. Who would have thought? You know.
Yeah. But those
That's Nowak
pictures,
right there on the far right, with
Mhm.
the sport coat and the white shirt.
Yes. And I think he's in Vienna, his place of birth, when that picture is taken. And then the other one is Karina Tarnita, and one of those shirt sleeves in that picture is Martin Nowak, which I found quite fitting
So
as
that
like
striped shirt right there.
Yeah,
She's
there's a
with
white
him.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it shows literally, kind of how close they were at the PED. So yeah, this is just like I said, I'm going to try and post this. We don't have to kind of really click through anything on here, but those are just sources. So it talks about a couple of those. The first two are Axios. It talks about Leon Black and kind of how he was used as that funding conduit. And how there's one thing about how he owed Epstein favors. That was how Epstein kind of presented it to someone. And so that starts to sound a lot more like blackmail. Nature, so we were just talking about Pergamon Press. Nature came from Pergamon Press, was owned, I think, at one time. Some connection, it was something like that. But they published, I just found it interesting because they published, kind of a newer article about Epstein files and reveal deeper ties. And that was the one where I found the Romanian reporting, and it's all in Romanian. I didn't translate it, so I didn't read it. But if you're interested in translating that, you can go see what the Romanians have to say about that Princeton professor. Yeah, that next one, like I said, Harvard's own newspaper said he donated 30 million, which is 3 times more than the number that Harvard gave in that 2019 press release that I read. And then Daily Princetonian article on Karina Tarnita. So some of these, school newspapers have the best reporting on, their own professors and stuff. Right. Well, it's still.
She's now a professor of ecology and evolutionary biology at Princeton. So she's gone upward and onward. There's a recent that article you quote is like from 2 weeks ago. Let's see if I can bring it up. This is her right here. So people are they're digging through all this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found that article useful. I found it pretty good. So yeah, that has kind of, I think maybe some links to the emails too that I kind of mentioned her in.
What's interesting is who got their careers going? Who did they all benefit from the Epstein network? You don't know. Who's making up fake academic credentials or whatever, you just don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, I mean it's all over the place like we've been talking about. So yeah, I think the next slide gets into other Harvard connections, which I think are just worth briefly mentioning. Yeah, so Larry Summers is widely, he's been in trouble for a while now, since 2019, kind of when it came out, but he's widely recognized as an intimate Epstein associate. He was the president of Harvard when Epstein founded the PED. I'm pretty sure I read that. And then he has been Bill Clinton's Treasury Secretary, and he was an OpenAI board member In addition to having that Harvard's presidency. So very influential figure, one of those World Economic Forum, kind of keynote speaker kind of people. So, and that Summers comes up. I think did you mention Summers in one of the episodes that you did about was he the sashimi?
Yeah, he was. I'd never seen anything without flippers eat so much sashimi. Yeah, he was joking
that was
around with Bannon.
That was a ridiculous. I remember hearing that, and it's like when I was like figured it out as that guy.
Quote, yeah.
Alan Dershowitz. A lot of people know Alan Dershowitz, kind of connections to Epstein. He's been accused in the files, famously accused by Giuffre, which I think he was able to wiggle out of, but there was some, there was fallout from that for him. But yeah, he was a famous Harvard lawyer, and he defended Epstein during 2008.
Dershowitz has defended so many people. Here's the funny thing. You would have loved watching Summers eat sashimi after sashimi after sashimi, like the seal at the Central Park Zoo, then wash it down with a gallon of Diet Coke. Smiley face. I've never seen anything eat that much fish without flippers. And then Steve Bannon says, he's a performance artist around food. Quote, hey, can I get a sandwich? Unquote.
Yeah.
I took a video of it to show you. It makes David Blaine swallowing goldfish look banal. Just too much.
Yeah,
they talk so much crap behind people's back that probably people didn't know how much like gossipy.
I'm sure that always stuff like that happens.
Yeah.
So yeah, Summers, Dershowitz. I mean, Dershowitz, you could go for a whole show or whatever.
You could do a show on all these guys: Bannon, Dershowitz. This guy Nowak.
And then wider academic, we talked about some of these, but worth mentioning: Joy Ito, MIT Media Labs, notoriously close. Epstein helped fund Media Labs through the Leon Black Apollo investment conduit. Noam Chomsky. I think I know y'all were talking about Noam Chomsky on. Sorry, I don't know the names of all the podcasts you've been on, but I remember talk about Chomsky.
I was on one with Hans and Sean, and somebody said that they were with Chomsky and they thought he was the most evil man they'd been in the presence of, which is not part of his kind of public, persona. Like,
yeah. Yeah, I was talking about the hypnotism. That's right. It was Hans was talking about kind of this hypnotic, kind of hypnotic speech. And I was like, I thought back to the times that I'd listened to Chomsky, and I was like, I can, that seems to kind of like check out with me. Kind of like
they know. He knows NLP, so he knows like presuppositions. Epstein has been trained in NLP, which is Ericksonian modeling, and it's not like you don't say, I have $3 million, or you have. Wouldn't it be smart to have $3 million in your pocket, Dave? This kind of thing where it's like, of course I would. You never saw anything at the Santa Fe Institute, right, Dave?
That's fascinating.
Sure didn't. These kind of things. So that's the way you put ideas into people's brains.
Yeah, that's fascinating, and that's what I really, like I said, I've been listening to all of the shows and the different podcasts that you've been on, and everyone has been really great. And a lot of those podcasts are new to me. So, it's been.
Here's another one for Nowak before I forget. They're talking about an algorithm, but I think it's Jeff sending it back. Virtually, it is the individual. Maybe as part of a group or representative of its species, it now has a lower fitness than its protected counterpart. Maybe beauty needs mystery so that the algorithm should always somewhat flexibly concealed, like the privates of harem women. I don't know. This is 2009, so they're talking about algorithms back then.
Yeah, and that's what. Yeah. So. And this is one example. So the next kind of, I mentioned Murray Gell-Mann as the Nobel Prize winner, co-founds the Santa Fe Institute. And this is going to like bring it kind of back to New Mexico, because I think New Mexico is kind of the center of this genetics movement, research, eugenics, human, what, like baby farm. Whatever was going on there. So it's not that I'm like necessarily trying to say that Martin Nowak is the guy who's building the facilities underground at Zorro Ranch. It's just proving a point on like how these geneticists are surrounding Epstein. And Martin Nowak was particularly close. I don't know why he was particularly close. You know, if he was involved in some other part of his operation or some other part of his network. I don't, 100% know why Epstein was using him the way that he was using him. But when you bring it back to like some of the stuff and some of the speculation around a breeding program and around, kind of these, I guess this kind of farm idea, to know that he's networking in with the leader of the program for evolutionary dynamics at Harvard, like that is important context when you start to explore what are some of his other connections and what were they trying to accomplish in New Mexico. And so this is this is a recent article from I forget the name, it's the Santa Fe newspaper, but it leads with the quote: "In Jeffrey Epstein's telling, he came to Santa Fe for the scientists." And so Epstein is very open about his interest in recruitment and scientists. And he purchases Zorro Ranch, which is a 75. Yeah, there's that article. Really good article. Recommend reading it. But yeah, it says the sex offender and financier bought a remote estate spanning over 7,500 acres called Zorro Ranch in 1993.
It is so unusual. It is a freaking huge mansion in the kind of, part. It's south of Santa Fe and east of Albuquerque. Like there's nothing around there. It's so weird.
And there's a labyrinth there as well. I forget. There's one photo I've seen that has like the labyrinth in the background.
Circle.
So yeah, kind of as you get into it, like his neighbors are very interesting. I have that note somewhere, but that's actually from Snyder's article where he talks about that. Yes. So that guy, from what I saw, it was the guy who purchased the Zorro Ranch from the from Kahn and Indike, was comptroller candidate Don Huffing's family. They own former Epstein Ranch in New Mexico, and so Huffing's campaign said the candidate's family bought the ranch at a public auction 4 years after Jeffrey Epstein died. This was published on February 13th, 2026. This is the Texas Tribune that I'm reading from. But it's the family of Don Huffines, a former Republican Texas senator who is now campaigning to become the state's comptroller, bought the disgraced Jeffrey Epstein Zorro Ranch. And so that's really, because I had actually had a question about that, for a while, of what happened to Zorro Ranch and kind of like where did it go? But it's that guy's family. And his neighbors. So this is the other one that I will try and pull up. And this is from Reclusus of Stephen Snyder's article. But he was, so Epstein purchased the property in 1993 from prominent Democrat Bruce King, a 3-term New Mexico governor. So that was, 1993. King was born in Stanley and later died there, Stanley, New Mexico. His family still owns much of the land around Epstein's parcel. This would include King's son, Gary, a former attorney general in New Mexico and the Democratic candidate for governor there in 2014. Another neighbor is the Cerro Pelon Ranch, currently owned by fashion designer Tom Ford. Naturally, Ford is one of the names that appears in Epstein's Black Book. He is also another Democrat. Given the presence of the King family in Epstein and Stanley, Ford's presence makes the small town seem something of a southwestern base for various Democratic royalty. No doubt Cerro Pelon provided a further pipeline to Hollywood as well. Here's the really interesting part. Bizarrely, the state of New Mexico itself owns a considerable chunk of land right in the middle of Epstein's parcel. Nothing is present on this tract save for a structure built into the ground at the southern end. This brings to mind the long-standing allegations that New Mexico is one location for a series of massive underground bases spread across these United States and beyond. The New Mexico local is often referred to a Dulce base and is supposedly located underneath the Archuleta Mesa, the Colorado-New Mexico border. The Delta Force even allegedly engaged in a firefight with the Grays. So he's talking about the disinformation, and he goes into like and I know that you, I think, just did a show on that. Was it Saucers, Spooks, and Kooks or whatever? The Adam Go Rightly. I think it's talking about the same kind of
exact
that
same base, Dulce.
Yeah,
and Adam
and
Go Rightly. They did a documentary. That was what it was. So they were around these areas.
Yeah, and so that story, I mean, I'll just like, he has a paragraph on it.
This is where Stanley is. This is where the mansion is for people who don't know. It's literally kind of in the middle of nowhere. Like, it's not a close. I mean, it's about half an hour from Santa Fe, maybe, or an hour from Albuquerque. But it's,
if you want to, I think it's about an hour away from Los Alamos. I'm not sure how far away it is to Sandia National Laboratory, but Los Alamos National Laboratory and Sandia National Laboratory are the two scientific, like the government research facilities in New Mexico that it's like, if there's black science happening in the United States, it's through, it's through those facilities. And so, yeah, we'll get a little bit into why he was interested in, potentially being in New Mexico. But that the point about kind of like the disinformation, the Dulce base, and this like myth of the underground military base in New Mexico, it's this idea of that Benowitz was getting too close to Kirkland Air Force Base, and he was getting too close to the Air Force Operational Test and Evaluation Center. That was, a part of these kind of like, secret aircraft testing facilities. And so basically, to get Benowitz away from the real story of what was happening at Kirkland Air Force Base and kind of, maybe some of the tech that they were experimenting with, they cooked up this story about the underground alien base in Dulce or whatever, I guess. I don't know if you would agree with that.
I think that's accurate. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I had heard. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other underground like military facilities in the state of New Mexico. So that's, I think, 100% true in my.
Los Alamos is north of Santa Fe by about 15 minutes or a half an hour drive.
Okay,
there, so it's fairly. I mean, these are fairly close, like an hour, 2-hour drives.
But that point that he made about the state government of New Mexico owns a parcel of land in Zorro Ranch, I found very, very interesting.
And that somebody sold like a piece of land, kind of almost like a oasis in the middle of somebody else's huge property too. So it's strange. It's like buffered by somebody else's larger property. So they didn't sell something like on the edge of a huge plot of land. They sold something right in the middle. So it's,
and that's like, and the picture that exists of it is, it looks like it's like a hatch into a tunnel. So that's incredibly bizarre. That's incredibly disturbing. But that let me see kind of where he goes.
Ranch. Probably people are driving out there like, what the heck is going on? They just said, for people who don't know, they just set up like a $2 million fund to investigate Zorro Ranch and see what the hell is going on there. That's from the state government
of New Mexico.
Correct.
Interesting, because it's been the state where he's been one of the most protected. And so I mentioned I mentioned Tom Ford, and I mentioned the governor, the 3-term governor who owned, most of the land kind of around, or who he purchased the property from, and who still owns a lot of the land around him, that Bruce King, kind of the King family there. And then also other New Mexico politicians show up. I think, let me see, it was like Bill Richardson, who was someone, I can't find him right now, but
there it is. New Mexico House unanimously enacts Epstein Truth Commission. Members include Democratic bill, Republican bill sponsors, and I think they put across like $2 million. There it is. Subcommittee, which runs through the end of the year but can be extended, will have a budget of $2 million.
It'll be interesting to see.
Funded by money that was in a settlement for failing to identify the abuses at the ranch.
Yeah, and that happened. So there was what I mean by like he had protection in New Mexico. He he got caught in Florida and he got prosecuted, and it was a sweetheart deal. It was a slap on the wrist, but they still had to prosecute him. In New Mexico, there was a very similar situation. There was a very similar allegation that had been made, and the local police had become aware of it, and they did the opposite of what it seems like the Palm Beach police seemed serious in investigating, Jeffrey Epstein and kind of like that network. And it seems like, at least the stuff that I was, been reading from the Miami Herald and Julie K. Brown, is it seemed like the West Palm Beach, police department had a pretty staggering case against Epstein sex trafficking, kind of network down there. And then it was, they started to see some suspicious activity happening, kind of with the grand jury and happening with like some of the politics in it. And they realized that this was too big for them. And so then they referred it out. And when they referred it out, the state prosecutor, and the FBI killed the case. And that was what led to the sweetheart deal. But that was the opposite of what happened at Zorro Ranch. From what I understand, is that the Stanley Police Department just, covered it up. And that's what I mean. He paid, he's embedded in the, the political structure and the political networks of New Mexico. So much so that the state owns a, piece of property on his land. So then I wanted to that 1993 date, and then if you want to bring some of the other stuff up like that you've kind of gone over with, some of the breeding program and whatnot, and talk about, some of the, like what the victims have said about that property, we can kind of do that after.
Okay.
But I wanted to bring up that Robert Maxwell and the promise scandal.
Okay.
And talk about that, about how, and just really set that, kind of set the stage in New Mexico. And so this has to do with, and I think we even talked about this a little bit. It was just kind of a tangent in the last Dulles episode. We talked about Israel's nuclear program in the 80s and how kind of involved Robert Maxwell had been in the Israeli nuclear program. And so the promise scandal that we mentioned earlier in this episode, so the story is that there's this guy and he creates the software for the Justice Department. And, I know a lot of people may have heard the promise story, but if you haven't, this guy creates this software, and this is before the internet. This is before AI. This is before kind of all of this, kind of this boom of tech happens in the 90s.
It's the first relational database software. So it's like making connections between data and stuff like that.
And it allowed for like much more transparency through police departments is kind of what I read. It was like it allowed a local police department to put in a record. And then if you were in Washington in the federal government, it's like you could look up that, kind of that file or something, as I understand it. But it was an incredibly important, piece of software, and the CIA saw how it was working for the Justice Department and said, we will have that. And they stole it from him, and they put spyware into it that allowed for a backdoor monitoring of, all activities on the database. And the United States took care of selling the spyware to financial institutions across the world. And that was really so that they could kind of track the flow of money. And it really assisted with money laundering operations, because they could see how their money was moving through different countries and if it was going to get flagged at one place. And they were the first people to know if there was an issue, and they could get in contact with who they needed to contact and get get everything through. It's also very effective for tracking enemy money. And so they took care of the financial side of it, and they got it into all of the, financial institutions to use it. And then they gave Israel the military backdoor. And so they had Israel sell the spyware to militaries across the world. And one of the militaries was the United States. One of the clients for the Israeli version of the spyware was, I think it was the United States military and the Department of Energy. And so Robert Maxwell created this fake tech company in the 80s and through his connections was able to, get a meeting with Los Alamos, with the people he needed to at Los Alamos, and, kind of in the, military establishment, and they sold the software, and they were able to successfully siphon nuclear secrets out of the United States. And that obviously took a lot of coordination with the CIA. Like I said, the CIA was working hand in hand. They were selling the financial side of it. And so it's, again, when we talk about Mossad, yes, Mossad was doing all this stuff, but it's absolutely with the knowledge and coordination of people within the government of the United States. Anyways, that's Los Alamos. Like I said, Los Alamos is one of the people that get this software, and one of the places where these nuclear secrets are being siphoned out of. It's right in New Mexico. And so Maxwell has cultivated, already kind of this, community. And it's like, I don't know if people at the Department of Energy were pissed, or people almost were, upset that he had done this, but Epstein buys a property in 1993, just a few years after this happened. And what happened in 1993 is described as basically a fire sale of scientists that were working at Los Alamos, because funding after the fall of the Soviet Union, like, you didn't have a need for Los Alamos National Laboratory nuclear weapons development.
Right. It's like a museum now.
Yeah. And that's what, so this was like, he positioned himself right in the center of this state in order to recruit like the scientific interests that were still, very much present in the area. And like I said, he was networked in with Murray Gell-Mann, who's in the Santa Fe Institute, and that's a big part of that. But that really, like, when we talk about Epstein taking the baton in terms of this, like, kind of scientific, like, interest in the scientific community, I think it highlights that. We talked about on the last show is the honeypot that Maxwell organized for Mordecai Vanunu in Rome, so that Mossad could kidnap the whistleblower scientist and imprison him back in Israel. And so, yeah, Maxwell had literally set up the situation for Vanunu to be kidnapped. There was an international incident, very big deal. And then Maxwell also arranged for a large number of ex-Soviet Jewish scientists to immigrate into Israel after the fall of the Soviet Union, so that they could further develop the nuclear program. So anyways, but that does connect it kind of back, to New Mexico. And that's, like I said,
the mansion's a perfect place to, like, be a center point for all kinds of skullduggery, Like, they can drive over to the Santa Fe Institute. They can drive to Los Alamos. You can see all the scientists. They're close to all these bases. They're hidden away, So who knows what the hell? I mean, the other thing is, like, the Zorro Ranch pitchfork adds, like, the creepiest element to it, to, like, this whole thing. I don't know if you've seen this, but this is literally the Z for Zorro Ranch. Have you seen this?
The entrance.
Yeah.
I have not seen the tail of it.
Yeah.
So, and that's what you had brought up more about, kind of maybe like was that account that it's the, that horrifying, like, talking about the baby being stolen. I think it was from the teenage victim. Is there context of where that happened?
No, but it seems like it's New York. Like, she seemed to be centered in New York. But and that baby being taken is, like, legit from a real litigation that was fairly recent by a private big firm, so it's like 2021.
And that's what the next one of the items on the agenda is, to get into some of those cases. And because I'm sure it's like this trust and Indike and Khan have to be wrapped up in that. And so and I know that there was Virgin Islands litigation that happened, and there's been a ton of civil action.
Huge payout for Virgin Islands. Like, I know that there was at least one payout for $60 million.
Yeah.
And, like, the public didn't even go into that. Like, it didn't hit the mass media, obviously. So the media is totally controlled in this country.
Yeah. And that's why I was like, and kind of like doing some of this, it's like you come across stuff where it's like, how is this?
Why is nobody covering this? Why is this spiked?
Yeah. And it's, obvious. And it's, I completely agree with you of kind of like, they can't really spin it right now. So they have to just stay silent. In terms of like the mainstream media, is there's
They're
nothing
trying
good
to,
for them to
yeah.
say.
No, they're only going to get in trouble. A lot of people who've downplayed it are like their careers. Are like, why are you downplaying this? This is freaking huge. It's a huge story. They're stealing babies and like baby incubating, and there's like deaths and people.
Yeah.
There's dead bodies. Like, what the heck is going on? Like, it's like who knows what else is going on? That's the whole problem. But I did a show with Tommy's podcast. I just published it, I think, yesterday. It's called Pedo Hellscape, and I went through I have like 3 different civil litigation documents from 3 different people.
Okay, I need to listen to that then.
Yeah,
because
well, you
that's
can listen to
exactly what
that, and I talk about the EFTA numbers, so you
Yeah.
can see those documents. They're still extant, but they're very important because they're post Epstein.
Yeah.
So they're post 2019, and it's really creepy because Dershowitz is like they're sending stuff to Dershowitz saying this is the worst example of sexual abuse that I've ever heard, and I want you to respond. And then he's in public saying, I didn't do anything. Denial, denial, denial. But he's not saying, yeah, I've been in cases where I've seen this network raping kids, and they're raping like kids. Like I talked about on that show, it's like 5-year-old kid in the mansion. They have pictures of it.
Yeah.
That's what they're keeping from the public. That's how much like Bondi and Patel are lying. Like, and it's lying by omission. It's the greatest form of lie, is what George Orwell said. So they're just not telling people about it. Super creepy.
It's
Here's the story. This is Hank Harrison. People have disputed this statement by him, but it goes way back, and this is from Kirby Summers. This is Sommers. This is not. This is something she found, so I'm trying to give her credit. Not really, if I can, competent enough to open this window, but this is validated. She said this is from Hank Harrison, who's the dad of Courtney Love. He's known for telling tall tales, but I'll read it out. Since my daughter was in Epstein's Black Book in 2003, and since she bragged to me about how she was procuring victims for him, so it's just a huge. They're all procuring stuff. I'm not saying everybody, but it's like that's the default in my mind. That's my opinion. I think I have a right to speak with some authority here. The crimes are 10 times worse and 100 times more numerous and more degenerate than you can imagine. The New York, Mexico Zorro Ranch is bad, but when victims were worn out, they would simply be taken to the desert and buried or taken to sea, weighted down and dumped overboard. The ones who survived are lucky to be alive. We are talking multiple slave murders here. Clinton did not procure slaves. Trump did. Google me before you reject this comment. And you see these girls as slaves. I don't know which ones survived and which ones didn't, but there are pictures where they're treating them like furniture. Like literally they're like, and they talk about, say horrible things about them. They're clearly sex slaves. I mean, these are not like, oh, we're just trying to have sex with them and we're, paying up. They're treating them like slaves. Like that's how bad it is. This is from the Zorro Ranch too. I'll read this. This is open for dispute whether this is real or not, but some people have said this is code words, and I think there's codes in this. But they did have like a little kind of stable there, but it says from Sarah K to Jeff or LSJ or somebody. Wanted to make sure you guys knew Jeffrey Epstein told Wendy to get rid of all the quote show unquote animals on the ranch. Not just saying show animals, but just like quote in quotes. Miniature horses, pig, turkey, goats, Diablo, etc. Wendy said she will try and sell what you can. I don't think Jeffrey Epstein much cares what happens to them, as he said to just kill them. I think the only thing we're keeping is the chickens for the eggs and the horses which someone can ride. Make sure J.E. told Wendy to get rid of the miniature horses, but then she says, I think the only thing we're keeping is the horses. There's a lot of problems here, and chicken is a known term for like little boys and girls. You can look that up. So then it adds like chicken for the eggs. Like these people, they have private chefs. Like who cares? Just leave it to somebody else. Leave it to the chef to procure food. Like people bring them food on trays. That's how they eat. They don't spend time cooking or going to the restaurant or anything like that. So that's open for dispute. That's 2011.
And that's what I mean. It's getting into, and then I think when you like that kind of maybe one of the next steps is like looking about into this infusion of tech, and looking about at the intersection of this network focused on tech and this network focused on evolutionary biology. And I think when you begin to intersect those two and begin to understand kind of what maybe his Epstein's philosophy is, or the Epstein network, some of the Epstein network's philosophy is, and when you engage with some of those concepts of like transhumanism and kind of, some of that other stuff, I think, to understand maybe like about some, like what some of these programs were. I mean, there's a New York Times article that was written back in 2019, and I don't pay for the New York Times, so I can't read it right now, but the headline is Jeffrey Epstein hoped to seed human race with his DNA. And this was a pretty like, this has made the rounds, a ton of times since 2019. But back then it was like the New York Times was kind of publishing this stuff about how he wanted to start a breeding program and he wanted to impregnate 20 women at a time, and that he had this whole operation kind of going at Zora Ranch that was connected in with whatever he was doing. And maybe that was at the time when they were talking about, it was like, a 16-year-old girl or 17-year-old, girl, like that was the kind of, victim, typical victim. And they weren't talking about, the younger victims that, you mentioned, but I mean, they were talking about a breeding program in the New York Times. And now it's like, I don't really see a lot of those kind of articles coming out of mainstream media right now. And it's like, I see a ton of work being done, kind of in this alternate space, but it's like you have a lot of evidence and you have a lot of smoke, but it's like until you were part of an investigative agency that was able to like go in there and really kind of like it's going to be tough to like kind of find exactly like, I guess, the smoking gun. But
There's
like
3.5 million documents. I don't think people have gone through them all yet.
Yeah.
I mean,
and that's it could be, there could be a ton in there. And that's why it's important, to like, to kind of like look into a lot of these different connections and try and see, kind of see the ways they show up. But it's a lot of work getting to just a base of trying to understand kind of who all is involved and who's playing what role and, how they're connected. And
do you want to go through, do you have time to go through some of the comments?
Yes, please do.
Maestro, great timing. That's Epstein's interesting cloning, no question. I look at the published scientific works of these freaks. Yeah, they're really crazy. A lot of the stuff that came out, they're talking about new genomes, like this guy Trivers.
Mm-hmm.
I did a show on Trivers and his ideas. Let's see, emails brother giving him financial advice.
Yeah.
Or genius, he was a plonker. Yeah, that's what I said. I know it heard the term plonker before, but
yeah, he gets, it was like 10 million in the will and the trust.
No work on game theory. That was kind of a hot topic at one point, or still is, really. Just game theory is a hot topic around academics, things like that. Fascinating stuff. When Ghislaine Maxwell has to keep a person's morals in check, they must be a psycho. Probably, yeah. How to bring on the doomsday? Yeah. So he was talking about Erica Kirk is connected to Romania, allegedly. That's my understanding. Does Erica Kirk and any or Elias's show up in the files? Not to my knowledge. She's close though. She's one state over. She's in Arizona. So, let's see. Working on somebody's behalf, I think so. Looks to me like JE was supplying those eugenicists with human lab specimens, possibly. I don't know. We are speaking about Robert Maxwell. Yes, the pension funds from his neighbor. Yeah, it's newspaper. Apparently, he stole 400 million pounds in pension funds.
Yeah, and then I think you went, and this was right around the time that he got burned. We talked about him getting burned by Ari Ben Minash. And so that happened, and then it started to come out that he had stolen that money, and I think he asked Israel, he's like, I need some help here. I need the money. And their answer was no. So
yeah, I think he threatened him. He tried to pull some like rank or something on him, and they were like, "Oh, guess it's time for you to take a big swim, walk the plank, or whatever." He did not slip off the boat while taking a wee as much as Epstein did in Dinosaur. Totally agree. I don't think these guys were I can do. I'll just do a whole show on why Epstein did not make it out of that jail. Dave Rockefeller's main guy, maybe. I know that I think he got into the Trilateral Commission because of David Rockefeller.
Yes. And Rockefeller's in the Black Book, and the Rockefellers' involvement in these kinds of networks goes back decades. Really interesting thing. But that whole, it's the kind of like the idea of it's not the Trilateral Commission, but it's the Council on Foreign Relations. And Jeffrey Epstein was a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. And I wanted to mention that because that network comes out of, it actually connects into the Astor's estate at Cliveden. And so the British wing of the Astor family, it was like the cousin I think it was the cousin of John Jacob Astor IV. They went over to Britain, started the Astor clan there, and that had Cliveden, and the Pilgrim, like the Pilgrim Society would meet there, which evolved into the Round Table Group, which evolved into the Council on Foreign Relations. And so this was a network that all of these kind of like Anglo-American, people like the Rockefellers would have been, kind of involved with, this group and stuff like that. So yeah, those people go way back.
Hey, Hill Doggy, welcome. One of my long time listeners from back before the censorship, the 4 years of censorship that I had. Such a joke. Actually, the censorship did me right because I put everything into podcasts, and now my podcast took. So, but feels nice to be back. The high tech YouTube is really incredible. I'm from Santa Fe, and I had no idea Ford lived out there. Yeah, I guess so. Jose Zorro Ranch plus has vents coming from underground. I believe it. It's a huge freaking thing. Marfa, Texas is very kind of south. It's Marfa. It's by the border. It's really kind of southwest Texas. It's in a very dry zone. I've been there. It's actually kind of a cool little spot if you want to get away from it all. There's nothing by there. But if you don't have anything to do and don't want to do anything, go to Marfa. I mean, it's a one pony town, is like they say. There's not much there. A couple of restaurants. Let's see. Tom Ford lived close to Hackman. Yeah, a lot of celebrities like Santa Fe. They really like it. So Santa Fe is a really cool city. If people get a chance, go check it out. Albuquerque's not that great. It's also super cheap in New Mexico. It's probably one of the cheapest states. Like I live in California where everything's expensive. Yes, Richardson was an Epstein regular client. Virginia Giuffre said she was trafficked to him. So, and so these are like it's just like Lutnick said. Epstein was the greatest blackmailer ever. So it makes sense that he's blackmailing people with political power or, oversaw legal systems, law enforcement to stay safe. Then he could pull his shit whenever he wanted to. Pegasus. Yeah, Isabella Frank Molina. That's right. That's the connection to Santa Fe and to Jack Parsons. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I was on Grimerica Outlawed, and Graham was telling me about that, and
that's true.
That's bananas.
It is bananas. There is no doubt about it. Epstein is dead. I would say, in my opinion, Epstein 99% dead. Those AI pictures are not him. And one of the weird things is they took so many pictures of his dead body. That's what's consistent in a lot of these assassinations is not proof of life, but proof the dude is dead.
Did you see that Bill Barr had showed up in a document that was claiming that he had been an abuser?
Yes.
Yeah. That
also there's two guys who were in the MCC, and they're both mobsters, and they're like, oh yeah, Epstein was killed. They're telling you because they know Bill Barr was lying about it. Like, why are you lying about it? Because it's an operation. There was an operation to get him. He was Epstein was supposed to die on July 23rd. He was supposed to be dead right away, and that Tartiglione, I think, was supposed to kill him. It didn't happen because I think what happened in the 23rd is that Epstein was drugged and then strangled, but they couldn't tell they didn't get the death thing. And so it was kind of botched. And so the next time they really did. There's a third party who did his autopsy. Hyoid bone broken. His
Yeah.
cartilage is broken. They would have had to fake so much stuff. He's not worth keeping alive.
Yeah, that's what
Come on,
he's.
man.
Yeah,
I mean, he's too dangerous. Like, he knew he was the central post of all this, like infant rape and stuff, like crazy stuff, like 5-year-old kids.
yeah.
Let's see. It's all about Prometheus. Yeah, definitely those eggs and those chickens are kids and eggs, human eggs. I'm on the fence. I don't know.
Yeah, and I
Epstein
don't
is
know.
connected to Best Friends. How? Right? Tell me that. Yeah, Best Friends is fairly close to that. They're in southern Oregon. I mean, southern Utah. Excuse me, north Arizona. Talk about being in the middle of nowhere where nobody can see what you're up to. They're in
Utah.
Yeah.
Utah's weird.
Paul Levis, been listening maybe 12 years. Thanks, William Love from UK, Southampton. Thanks, Paul. Thanks for listening. I appreciate it. You've seen really 3 million files. Feels like we maybe see 30,000 max. There's a lot of dupes. They did a sloppy job and put a lot of duplicates in there. I don't know why, but
Maybe
they didn't. And it's clearly the files are given to the public in a means. Like you talk about a relational database, like they did something from Promise Software where you only see 10 results at a time. You have to keep clicking through. It's the stupidest thing imaginable. They could have done it so much, but they could have hired some consulting company to do such a better job. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's been brutal. I've had a lot of problems with that.
It's done intentionally. There's absolutely no question. Do you think Ghislaine Maxwell is testifying for prison? She's aged, and some of these people do get work. They get like plastic surgery, so maybe she did. I don't know. I mean, these are spy type people, so maybe they had an outs or planned outs or something there. Liz left Santa Fe, lived there 13 years. Yeah, it's great. These guys act like Satanists. There's no question about it. Pegasus Global is going to build a ghost town out in the desert for experimentation. I'm not surprised. Let's see. Pete's. That's it. Glass is in prison. Thanks for all the comments. We are at the 90-minute mark. Dave, is there anything you'd like to add?
I don't think so. Unless there's anything else you want.
Been talking a lot and streaming a lot recently. We got 250 listeners, guys. Thanks for listening on all the platforms. So really appreciate all the great comments and stuff. Where can people find your work, Dave?
Podcast is Bad Press. So yeah, you can look that up on wherever you get podcasts. Substack is Hemispheric Press, and there's a Bad Press tab in there. That's where I write. So I've done 6 parts on Epstein. I've done some other articles on stuff we've talked about on this show. I've got some other stuff on there. So anyways, just kind of those 2 places. That's pretty much it.
Substack and then Hemispheric Press too. So I'll put links to that in the show notes. And this will be our 4th show. So Epstein the Eugenicist. There's a lot. You can do like 10 hours on this. Like I haven't even bring up my other stuff. I'm just at 90 minutes. I gotta head out. But it's just like there's so much information here. It's really going to change our understanding of these kind of elite networks, how corrupt they are. Because I think he's just one node. He's just one node, and these guys are doing other stuff. So, but
yeah, and that's I think next I'm going to be trying to get into kind of this a little bit of the transgender, but the transhumanist philosophy of the tech, world that he gets kind of caught up into, and how that, like I said, intersects with that evolutionary biology, and how that would, contribute to kind of a breeding program, and maybe provide, some of the motivations for, kind of some of this black science, that's, revolves around human trafficking and slavery. So I think, I think that's maybe the next part. But yeah, like you said, you could do 10 hours. It's insane.
On just this one aspect of it, like the Epstein files will just be something else. They'll be like a reference point for like parapolitics forever, kind of like the Panama Papers or something like that, something crazy. But these are darker. Like I don't know if the Panama Papers involved it's just financial stuff, but this is like transhumanism, like you said, and like cutting edge type, intellectuals talking about the future and making the future in their image. Private parties making the future in their image without state intervention. or
And
overt
that
state intervention.
and the comment about it being religious, I mean, 100, yeah, absolutely. I think it's 100% involved with that. And that's what I mean is like shaping the future in your image for this philosophical religious belief that you have, and you basically hate humans, or like, kind of normal, and, are looking to get rid of them. And then to have these basically, I don't know, biological robots or whatever it is to abuse and, kind of use however you want. And that gets into like, you go into like Genesis 6, and you get into like a lot of the narratives that have existed for a long time about genetic manipulation. And, I think that does add really important and valuable context.
Imagine what happens to somebody like Ghislaine Maxwell and Epstein, where they're just moving through people so fast and trafficking. And after a while, they're just totally depersonalized and dehumanized. Like, I got just another person, let's do the same thing. They have the same kind of grooming playlist and love bombing like a cult. And then when they're done, they're done. They're traumatized. On to the next one. Like, I mean, they must just have the most, their consciences must have just gotten singed to nothing. Like, they just
And we
don't
talk,
care anymore.
and I know we talked about like the labyrinth, and on that Recluse article, it's like he leads with the Minotaur, kind of in the labyrinth, and it's like just the beast that feeds on virgins as a sacrifice, and it's that's exactly, it's
what it
like
feeds
it's
like.
feeding the beast.
Yeah.
It's literally not just Epstein as a singular beast, but the entire network is just shredding through human sacrifice and human victims. And you see that, I know that, I think it was Sean was talking about how he was going back to the Phoenicians and going back to Moloch and going back to those blood sacrifice and those cults and stuff. But it shows up, and it shows up everywhere. I mean,
It's like the United States was kind of like an anomaly in some ways, because it shows up in so many other cultures in history, like Carthage, and even the old Bible. Even in old Israel, they still had problems with Molech and Balaam and all this other stuff. And there's all kinds of battles between kind of like the believers of the Old Testament and all of these occultists. I guess they're their version of their day occultists.
and yeah, I mean, that is extremely relevant to what's going on. The Old Testament, and talking about Judaism and the state of Israel, and kind of,
There's still like
what's
weird
happening.
things going on. Like there's Satanism in modern day Israel too. Like some of
That's
these
what I
rabbis.
mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's there. I mean, that's what's crazy about
It's
crazy
really
about the
crazy.
Bible, is that it's there. And then
It's a history of it, right? Yeah.
mm,
All right, Dave. Till next time. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate it.
absolutely.
Everybody, thanks a lot for all the great comments and being here. Really appreciate it. Peace.
Thank you so much. I have a good night.
Yeah.